And at that point, I'm going to move on and move on to the question and answer session for both our speakers. If you've got some questions for me on this, you're very welcome to ask them now, but we will be having a breakout group looking at environmental and climate protection together this afternoon, so we'll be able to kind of revisit some of those then. Okay, if we can get to that. So can I move on to the question section? And who would like to ask a question? I'm just going to go to Tim first. I'm afraid we're going to have to share a microphone. Would you
mind? Thank you. This is a question for Alex. If your city, if Bristol is going to be carbon neutral, you're going to be relying very heavily on decarbonisation of the electricity grid, of transformation of the vehicle fleet, and also the decarbonisation of the scope 3, the consumer, the consumption emissions, all of which are outside of your control. So the question really is, does making statements about things that you can't affect undermine the credibility of the messaging, or is that necessary to show the level of ambition? So does it actually enhance the credibility?
So I don't know the answer to that question, and I suppose time will tell, and I'd be interested in people's perspectives. It was interesting when the message was first declared. There was a bit of a reaction from some about that this would undermine credible, because it was an incredible goal and therefore not credible, and clearly the conditions in the UK then and now are not aligned to achieve that goal. And practically, you know, if you want to invest £9 billion in a place, that requires quite a lot of labour to actually build the things, install the things that you need with that money. And so there is a kind of practical question about how quickly one can actually do it. But what it does is, from a political point of view, and I don't mean party political, but more general, is it shifts the time horizon from being someone else's problem that someone else will sort out and we'll do a bit to help, or that's fine because the clever people at Bosch or and other suppliers are available, will invent a technology that will fix it for us. And so when we were writing the climate strategy, we said one of the things was no unicorns. So we have to, because it's only 10 years, we have to use things that we already know exist. So we focused on electrification and heat pumps and that sort of thing, and not maybe hydrogen in the gas grid from sources unknown in technology that's unknown. So it makes you think about what you can do now. And the other bit in the kind of context of 2050 is we've said, well, if 2050 is the statutory target where everything everywhere in this country must be net zero, then it's logical that some places, some things will come first. Whether it's 20 years earlier, time will tell. That could be a challenge. But you know, if we don't hit 2030, my measure is how far have we got? How quickly can we reduce emissions in the next 5 years, rather than being worrying about the exact time we cross a line. So, but yeah, time will tell whether it's enhanced or damaged the credibility of it.
I had a question over here. Yeah. Thank you.
This is another question for Alex. A bit of a left field one here for you. Gareth Bowman, Leicester City Council. Your one city strategy, does it have anything about the effect of climate change on your contaminated land burdens?
Ooh, I don't think so. No. Okay. I'll come and ask you what that might be later. Thank you.
Another question, I'm afraid, for Alex. I found it very helpful in terms of matters of process. I was less clear about the actual impacts you were managing to have. For example, you mentioned the area of the local authorities' procurement policies. Can you give us some examples of the way in which you have directly influenced that and the amount of change you've been able to deliver in terms of influencing procurement. And equally, perhaps another area, in terms of your regulatory policies. I wonder, for example, if you've been able to do anything in terms of exercises of planning permission, perhaps in major developments, requiring the use of clean vehicles or something coming onto site, those sort of things. Can you give us some substantial sense of things actually delivered?
Yeah. So the procurement work, we're just about to adopt the new sustainable procurement policy. So it's a bit premature for that. I think we went through a process of having good sustainable procurement maybe 10 years ago, and then it kind of got dismantled in some ways as part of the cuts and the need to just reduce the amount of money we were spending on everything in the post 2008 recession. And we're having to kind of rebuild that expertise and that policy framework and processes within the organization. So it's too early for us to have those metrics. But about 2 hours time, our management team is considering a thing for our capital program. And that obviously that is a big chunk of our procurement, looking at a set of metrics that will really enable us to demonstrate that our capital program is delivering on more sustainable outcomes. On the other question about regulatory stuff, planning policy. So making the declaration hasn't enabled us to change planning policy at this point in time because we're waiting on our local plan refresh or redrafting. But we will have in that net zero policies. We've consulted on a set of them. We're actually just going back and revisiting them now to improve them. The planning policy had to be delayed because of a lack of a regional policy strategy for a while. So it's taken a long time. But what we've been doing in the last decade is we had a policy that was a hierarchy for sustainable energy on buildings. And that hierarchy approach has proved really useful because as the technology and costs of technologies have changed, we're able to move, because the idea was you should start at the top and work your way down until you found a thing you could actually deliver on site. And what we've found is that we're able to get developers to deliver much better options. So major developments pretty much don't have now gas boilers in Bristol and haven't had for some years. And we're getting 20% on-site renewables for most of our schemes as well. And so that does have to be fought in many planning applications, we have to fight quite hard to achieve that. But that has been a really useful planning policy framework that's been able to last, 14 years and still be quite effective.
Johan Schillen from the Stockholm Environment Institute. I've got a question for both speakers. The first one is, of the £10 billion that you think is needed to make the shift, how confident are you that that level of resource can be mobilized? And then what power do you think the council has in terms of that 10 billion that you can direct it towards your low carbon strategy? And then I'll just say the other question as well. I was just wondering whether you'd done some scenarios on your road transport modeling in terms of the shift to electric mobility and things like that over time, so that you could sort of do projections into the future of what might be coming along the road, as it were.
So I suppose on the money side, we haven't had the readout from colleagues who were at COP, but actually what we're hearing is there is a lot of capital looking to invest in net zero projects, whether that's my pension fund or your pension funds or other investors who are looking for sort of longer term sound investments that are contributing to a safer world and asset value rather than undermining that. So we think the money is out there. Our City Leap procurement exercise is one way which we can use our powers to convene that money and make it easier for that money to come in at scale. Because one of the problems that we often hear is that the scale of investment that big investors want to make is just huge. And therefore, it's very hard for cities to present individual projects of sufficient scale to be attracted to some of those investment groups. And so CityLeap is seeking to do that. And also by working across all the opportunities within the city, looking to create kind of win-wins, or by packaging a ton of different things together, we think we can get better outcomes. Just not only more rounded outcomes, but actually you can use the more profitable bits to make some of the less profitable bits still financially acceptable, so the bundle becomes acceptable. And so we're doing that using the concession contract is essentially on our own assets, and we're hoping that that can then, because we can use those, and then that will then enable that partner or others to access the wider domestic market, for example, commercial market.
Great, thank you. I've got 3 more hands up in the room.
Should I say some word about
apologies? Yes, yes.
Concerning your
Oh, no, you don't.
we can, I think, concerning your electrification topic, we thought about it. We know electrification will play also a role mainly for a particulate matter, because the braking system and also all the tires can create more particulate matter. So our model is upgrading to also be able to simulate and modeling it for the future. And simulation, if we want to forecast this, we are also working on it to be able to predict more or less in the next 2 or 3 days, according to the traffic, to the know-how we are accumulating during the last few years. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, one thing I don't that's quite interesting is how do you deal with so many different aspects of environmental protection, you know, climate change, air pollution, noise, all the rest of them, without either oversimplifying and dropping some of them or ending up with something overwhelmingly large? I noticed in a lot of your projects, and actually Alex's too, that it does try and have such a broad focus. Does that help with kind of or hinder?
Okay.
On the technology
I think
solutions.
that's the point. You need to have a full picture at the beginning and then to focus on a specific area. So that's what we did with TfL. We'll look at all the area. We thought about, okay, should we look at the delivery company is a problem or just traffic signal? So we need to understand the full picture, then to focus on the specific. But of course, you need also to make sure if you change a traffic light in one area, it's not impacting another area 200 meters further. So this is also, that's why the full picture is important, because when you do a microscopic action, you need to make sure from a macro point of view, you can also understand.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Sorry, I was saying I have 3 hands up in the room. Robin, do we have questions? Can I come back to you in a moment then, because I don't want to neglect our online guests.
Thanks, Sarah. Gareth Simpkins from the ENDS reports. One question for Lionel. Regarding the air quality improvements in Brixton, what would have happened if there was no intervention? Because we're seeing changes in policy regarding, say, emissions from buses, introduction of the ULEZ, etc., and the gradual improvement in the fleet as more Euro 6 vehicles hit the roads. So what would have happened if nothing would have happened, if nothing was done?
Yeah, so in this area, TfL already implement Euro 6 and also hybrid bus. So all the biggest action on the TfL side has already been performed. So that's why they also decide to look at other new action. And if we will do nothing, I think the Brixton area is famous to exceed the European limit regularly. So I think they still will have this problem. But also the second, when we spoke with the councillor, she didn't have an idea of the impact of the background effect. So now she understands that traffic is a problem, but not the unique one, and she needs to understand the background. So she gets the point that she will have to speak with the other councillor around Lambeth, not only Lambeth is alone, and TfL was the big advantage. TfL take care of all London, not only one council, one borough. So that's how that could be a progress, is to have a common action together. So to answer to your question, yes, you need to do some change, otherwise it will still change in the bad direction, let's say.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from our keynote speaker, and then I'm going to go online, and then I'll be back in the room.
Thank you, Anna Hansel. It's a question for Eric. It's about technical specification of monitoring equipment. So one of the challenges is not just at the upper level, but it's how you know if you've reached the lower level, wherever we've set that. So even for 10 micrograms per meter cubed, PM 2.5, and certainly for 5, I understand there are challenges in the precision you can reach in the monitoring equipment to know you've actually got there. And it's not just a problem for, I think, the monitoring, but it also is if you're looking at evaluating the models that you have, because if you're evaluating a model at a very low level, you need a monitoring equipment that can measure at precision. So I just wondered about Bosch's approach to this.
Yes, so very, very good question. So the lower limit detection is a very important topic. We see that sometimes it can be missed. SO2, for example, is one of the biggest problem because it's only low emission of SO2, mainly in the city at least. So we develop with technical specification of Europe, we develop some test method to make it in laboratory, but also in field with different amount of SO2 or different amount of NOx directly in the box, so we can see the reaction. So we had this comparison with reference station, but also with exactly reference implementation of device of gas to see if what they give of gas is really what is measured. So this kind of method is clearly described in the new standard from Europe. So from the working group 42. And to go back to your second question about how we make the correlation with what we measure and what the dispersion model is modeling, there is a working group 43. Europe is working also on this topic, how to validate a model. So currently, this is fair mode, the biggest technique for understanding the accuracy of your model. Bosch has another approach. We use also our reference station plus a different small sensor. And this is where we are in discussion with working group 43 to develop a method together. So hopefully I will be able to give you more information in this direction in the coming months or year.
Another question for you, Lionel. My apologies about the pronunciation of that. Following the, in light of that traffic light management, improving air quality system that you've put in on Brixton, the question really is it feasible to replicate that over larger areas, as obviously the problem becomes ever more complex? Your thoughts about how that would be rolled out at a wider level?
Yes, so that's a very good question, and that's what we aim. Bosch is not just doing pilot project or proof of concept and then make it possible in another city. So yes, we think it's feasible to replicate it. There is not one unique solution. So maybe in one borough it will be the traffic light, another one will be the roundabout, another one will be maybe the bus stop will block all the traffic. So every borough has its own problem. And our goal is to make it replicable with the key stakeholders for traffic. And we know, for example, in London, Siemens, not to name them, but they are taking care of all the traffic light. So they have this know-how. So we are working with them as well. We are not saying, okay, Bosch, Siemens, we are two different companies. We don't want to exchange. TfL, of course, is taking care of this cooperation. So we know that we can replicate if all the stakeholders are involved together.
Thank you. It's Robin Whitehouse. I have my own question, which is, it was mentioned by Alex early in his talk about residential decarbonisation. We have obviously a move towards heat pumps on its way, but I'm just wondering, both from a political and practical view, and from the others, from both speakers, on the issue of the practicalities and technical difficulties in achieving residential decarbonisation. Not mention that a lot of people will be working at home and heating their houses, which never were before.
I didn't quite, I'm not sure what, I mean, I think I missed the question. I'm sorry, I may have just.
It's really about how practical and how are we going to decarbonise residential.
So I think our approach starts with a kind of fabric first. We need to insulate a lot of our homes much better than we have currently. We see district heating and as being a key plank of how you do that, because heat pumps, air source heat pumps, will work for the suburbs where you've got the space, but they won't be working very effectively in dense Victorian terrace areas or what have you. So it's, I think in some ways you've got a kind of dense solution, which is your district heating, and you've got a low density solution, which is the heat pump. Of course, the district heating will also be connected to heat pumps. So we're just installing the UK's largest water source heat pump in our harbour to start feeding our district heating network. So that's how, so it's that. Now, those are really easy words to say, and actually making those interventions, I know having done it on my own home, doing that insulation, installing that heat pump are not quick and are complicated things to do. And so what we've got to do is make them uncomplicated and easy and accessible for everybody, just to be able to go as easy as to get your boiler replaced, to get your heating system upgraded, changed.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to have to bring this session to a close. The question and answer session, not the entire thing. You're not getting your lunch just yet. Bear with me. If you'd like to thank our two speakers from and thanks for the interesting questions, and thanks to Robin for feeding in the ones from the online participants. If you've got more, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them.